Thank you very much. It's always difficult to have the last floor after two good speakers were talking. But let me say that I can imagine everybody in this room, like most of the people around the globe, are quite confused what is happening in the world these days. In a way, the way that humans look at the world is basically creating patterns. And when they observe things, they put the things in the pattern that they recognize, trying to find an explanation to what is happening. And if we see the world that we used to develop after the World War II, I do not want to sound very Eurocentric, but it was very much a world that was, so to say, Western dominated, where the prosperity and the growth was based on the system, democratic system of liberal values that was promoted mainly in Western Europe and the United States. And it turned into an ambition for a lot of people who lived under oppression, under authoritarian regimes, under communism, or who lived under oppression, that it was an inspiration for many of them that this is a path to prosperity, this is a path to growth, this is a path to a better life. And in a way, it is the way we see the world still today. However, there is another part of the human perception on the things, and that is that, while a lot of people like to have individual responsibility and lead the life in their own way, still a good part of the population wants to have a good example that they want to follow. They want to see somebody or someone or a group that is prosperous, and they like to follow. They are part of the population that also like somebody else to take responsibility for them. And that comes also as part of culture, or even if you want it, it's part of religion. And now, if we find ourselves in a situation where this leading part of the world, these Western values, are not offering anymore this kind of prosperity and growth as everybody was aspiring to, of course, people start reconsidering whether this is really the path to follow or whether alternatives should be sought. And if you just observe the European political scene, I speak more about Europe because it is a basis for a lot of news stories around the world, be it the news in Japan, be it the news in China, be it the news in Bolivia. You observe the European political scene and you often say the last liberal leader in Europe is Merkel. Well, in the patterns that we have developed over the last 70 years, Merkel is supposed to be conservative, Christian Democrat. Then you have the last British Prime Minister who introduced gay marriage. And again, in the patterns that we would put the politicians, he was a leader of a conservative party. Then you have the president of the French Republic, who was trying to make labor reforms and open up the market, while he was elected as a leader of what we would put in the pattern, a socialist party. And you have the liberals who are promoting open, free society. They're still holding up to where they were. Now, in this sea of confusion, there is an alternative emerging. An alternative which a lot of people say the populists are just listening to what the population wants to hear, and they offer them that as an alternative. Well, that is partially true. But there is also a great degree of certainty that those populists have something very in common. And that goes the same in the Netherlands, in France, in the United States, and also you can see it in those who are promoting religious extremism. They say, forget about prosperity based on the individual responsibility, on democracy, on tolerance, on patience. Listen to the leader. Listen to the person who is going to show you how life is. Systems do not work. Actually, it will be the leader or the community around the leader who are going to decide what is good and what is bad. Forget about having ambitions of change in life. Change is bad. We are going to bring you back the traditional way of life, something mystic, something that they believe deeply inside of themselves. They believe that is going to bring them, if not prosperity, at least stability. So this pattern is not only visible, but in European terms, they actually got together. In the middle of January, in Koblenz, in Germany, the leaders of all these populist movements came together and they agreed that they have actually a lot in common and that they should work together in order to set up this system of values as a basis for national politics. Now, I know this is going to be a discussion, and as I'm involved in politics in years, you give me a microphone, I can talk forever, because I have opinion on everything.
So we'll stop you right now then, Kirjas.
You better shut me up on time, because I also would like to hear the opinion of the others. One of the most important things that we are doing in Liberal International at the moment is taking a step back and looking what are our values, what do we stand for, what is the alternative that we offer to the people, and where is the hope that they should see in order for them to choose our alternative, and end the process where we are just going to see the what the opinion polls are saying and then go and offer the people what the opinion polls would tell us.
Thank you,
something which is very important. Said mentioned, are we going to see now cooperation between the United States and Russia? Actually not. We are going, what Trump is proposing and what Putin is enjoying and what Xi Jinping is actually working on is the 19th century world order, where the empires and the zones of influence were set up. You mentioned that the Russians have sent their troops to Syria. True, but the Saudis also sent their troops to Yemen. Without any approval of any international body, Saudis and a bunch of other states from the Gulf decided to send their troops to Yemen, and they're still there, and they're still fighting, and there's still a lot of casualties, and nobody really seriously says something about it or is trying to stop the Saudis. Why? Because there is more and more this prevalent sentiment that it is a Saudi's backyard. So they are the strong, they are the powerful ones. Let them sort out the mess. We do not have the capacity to get involved. It is the absolute same mentality that Trump is saying, you know what, if there is something happening over there in Ukraine or what, Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan, let the Russians deal with it. We are not going to bother with that. Why? Because that's the Russian zone of influence. Leaving this part of the world, let's see what is happening in the South China Sea. And the militarization of the South China Sea by the Chinese, which have been persistently building over the last 10 years on the coral reefs, islands, on which they were building military aircrafts with not much reaction from the United States or from anybody else. The Filipinos were screaming, of course. The Malaysians, the Vietnamese were screaming out, but there was not massive reaction because that's the Chinese backyard. So we are moving into a dangerous world of the 19th century where there are zones of influence, and when they collide, what happens? Happens conflict. We have seen that. There is an alternative to that. The alternative to that is the world order that we have been developing over the last 17 years, which is based on cooperation, on dialogue, and on talk. Democracy is a difficult business. And I think you in Tunisia, for example, learn it very, very well. Democracy is not going over there, winning the elections and saying, I am the Basha, I am the Sultan, I'm going to do whatever I want. No, democracy means sit down, talk, see how you're going to govern in order for the minority not to be upset, in order for people not to feel discriminated in the society. They will feel that they have lost something, but they will strive to be better. And this is a mentality that we need to replicate on a global level. But it's a difficult business that we have to be involved with. And if I just may add something else, it requires a lot of patience and a lot of education, because there are a lot of parts of the world who want to have better life in these days. I remember I was in Senegal in 2007 for 3 weeks campaigning not in Dakar. I insisted I want to be in the rural area. I was among the tribes in the desert. And when we were meeting the local people, the tribes who did not have any facilities, when I was there, I was the Tubab. I was the weird white person, alien. But when we were talking to the people, we were telling them about the ambitions of life, how they should work hard, get educated, get, more in life with great ambition to invest in themselves so they can one day have school, they can have water, they can have prosperity in life. And that worked as a vision. Nowadays, you go to the same village, the kids have smartphones. And they say, this is Paris. You know what? I'm going. But they say, no, you should not go. Stay here. Stay in this poverty, stay in this misery. Wait around 30 years, we'll build you a road. We might actually bring you water, but just be patient. No. In this modern age of technology, that doesn't work. It's very legitimate for those people to have a clear vision. I want it now, and I want you to deliver it to me. Now, find a politician or anybody in the world who will be able to deliver. So we need to be patient, but we also need to understand that demands of the people based on the new technology are completely changed to what they were before.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may add one thing that I have observed myself living in the United Kingdom for 11 years while being Macedonian. In the system of education in Macedonia and general in the public perspective, Macedonians are Europeans. We are white, we live in Europe, so we belong to the family of nations together with the Belgians, with the Norwegians, with the Brits, with the Swedes. And this is what was my conviction all the time. Moving to London and staying there 11 years, I realized that I do have a lot in common with the Syrians, with the Egyptians, with the Greeks, with the Turks, with the Kuwaitis, with much more, of course, the rest of Yugoslavs, much more than I have with my dear friends from the Scandinavian countries, left alone the Brits. And there is one great cultural difference that we have. First of all, that is the religion. The way I was brought up, the way we were brought up in the old Ottoman world, when I would make a mistake, I would be either slapped by my dad, very badly, which didn't happen, thanks God, because my mom would intervene to protect me, or instinctively my mother or my family would say, okay, fine, it's a kid, kids make mistakes, it's fine, right? So I never really got to understand where my real mistakes were, how to correct them, and how to fight for transformation of myself and the way I do the things in order to be able to not repeat the mistake and to have a better life. The way that they bring up the kids in the north of Europe, let me tell you, it's rather different. When you make a mistake, you have to recognize what was the mistake and then be readmitted back into the family, in the society, based on what you have understood. Or if you do not understand, ask, and they will tell you what your mistake was. Of course, that is afterwards being replicated in the way you communicate with the rest of the family, with the rest of the neighborhood, society, party, political party, and the government. And the thing that always bothered me is why my fellow Macedonians, when they're in Germany, when they're in Sweden, when they're in Britain, they're the most law-abiding citizens, they follow all the rules, they're at home. Do you know what is happening in Macedonia now? It's a total mess. It's a total chaos. Why? Because they do not trust the system back home. They do not believe that based on the way they were brought up, there will be ever functioning society based on rules. There is no justice. When there is no justice, there is no system, there is nothing that you relate to and you want to keep and preserve. On the contrary, when they're in Germany, when they're in Belgium, when in the UK, they will fight with all the means to maintain the system because there is justice. And I'm not saying that I'm not part of it. When I go to Macedonia, if I make a mistake, I know who to call and be absorbed. In the UK, I would go and be a law-abiding citizen. I said, okay, fine, punish me the way it is. Now, why am I mentioning this? This is very important in geopolitical, geostrategic way of looking at the things. You have to understand the cultural context of the people in order to be able to build your political narrative, to understand what you can communicate to the electorate, what you can do, how about you can bring change, And what should be your general expectations? You cannot expect that Tunisia will be Scandinavia within the next 5 years. And you cannot promise that to the people because that would be an utter lie. And politicians who lie are bad politicians. We have plenty of those bad hombres around. So we have to understand the geopolitical context which we have inherited and build our policies on that, still talking to each other when we are in different parts of the world, how we can learn from each other's mistakes. And again, as I'm Secretary General of an international organization, I don't want to sound Mediterranean Eurocentric. There is a lot to learn also from the Eastern cultures. And there is also a lot to learn from the way that South Americans have managed to accept all the diversities and ingrain them in the way they govern their societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Une autre question? Mariam.
Turkey was actually doing quite well in the last 15 years. The reforms that were started in Turkey were transforming the country into an economical powerhouse that a lot of people in the region were looking back at with some kind of nostalgia, not wanting the Turks to be back, but in a way, someone among us in our part of the world is actually strong enough and it's going to be prosperous in the future. The moment that that economic prosperity turned into a desire to revive the Ottoman Empire in the very similar way that it was subordinating the others in the past, that moment it turned troublesome. It is very much in line with what we were talking that we are returning back to the 19th century system where the empires were having their zone of influence. And Erdogan very much enjoys that role, believing that he can just behave that way. Shall we remind ourselves in his descent on Cairo and the speech over there, believing that he has the great leader has returned to the region? Or the entire influence that he has been trying to establish in Syria, or the financing of the political parties by Erdogan throughout the Balkans. Just look at the elections that took place 3 days ago in Bulgaria, and the influence that Erdogan was trying to portray over there over the ethnic Turkish minority. In that sense, there is a great contrast or great clash between his ambitions and the ambitions of the people in the region who actually do not want to have authoritarian states and do not want to return themselves under the Turkish zone of influence. He tried lately to save himself establishing a new alliance with Russia, but that was yet again a total failure. Look what is happening in Syria. It seems like Assad got its own part. The Russians got their own part. The Kurds got their own part. And what did Turkey get? A village on the border, perhaps, and trying to make sure that they're not going to have more trouble inside Turkey. And you're right, Mariam, they got about 2 to 3 million refugees. But it is on Turkey's own blame for the entire time letting the migrants, or the Islamic State, the Daesh fighters, moving from Western Europe through Turkey into Syria. Where was Erdogan at that time trying to prevent that? Right? He said he was passing on the intelligence to the Europeans, but why didn't you prevent it? So, unfortunately, the story of Turkey is a very sad one. From a very good perspective of becoming a regional power, the only thing that they will have in the future is that people in the region, Lebanon, Macedonia, wherever, will just watch their TV soap operas, but that's about it.